A Queensland man who claims he is the biological son of King Charles and Queen Camilla has made an appearance in a Brisbane court. He's attempting to prove a news publication has defamed him.
One question can silence the most confident royal experts in Britain. What would actually happen if King Charles gave up the throne? Ask it and watch the easy answers stop, because hiding behind that single scenario is a legal chain reaction across 15 countries. A family trauma so deep, the palace refuses to even speak the word. And one impossible question about Queen Camilla that 1,000 years of monarchy has never had to answer.
I speak to you today with feelings of profound sorrow. Throughout her life, Her Majesty the Queen, my beloved mother.
The experts know all three, and by the end of this video, so will you, along with the one quiet move already underway that almost nobody has noticed. The forbidden word. Here is something most people outside Britain never quite grasp. In the British royal family, abdication is not treated as an option. It is treated as a trauma, and to understand why, you have to go back to a single December in 1936, when King Edward VIII gave up the throne to marry the American divorcee Wallis Simpson. That crisis nearly broke the monarchy. The government could not accept the marriage, the Church of England stood against it, and while the Dominions were consulted one by one, the British press kept a silence the rest of the world refused to share.
There's a lot of Diana in William, and I'm sure Charles is probably the first person to see it.
Edward reigned for just 326 days. He signed his instrument of abdication at Fort Belvedere, with his 3 brothers watching, delivered a farewell broadcast to the nation, and sailed into exile that same night. One of those brothers, a shy man with a stammer who had never wanted the job, suddenly became King George VI. The strain of an unwanted crown is widely believed by historians to have shortened his life. And his daughter, a young Elizabeth, watched all of it happen. That is the part that matters. When Elizabeth turned 21 in 1947, she made a broadcast promising that her whole life, however long or short, would be devoted to service. She kept that promise for more than 70 years, working until 2 days before her death in 2022. In her family, in her court, and in the institution she rebuilt, the message was absolute. A British monarch does not quit. The crown is not a career. It is a life sentence accepted willingly. Charles was raised inside that belief. He waited longer than any heir in British history, more than 7 decades, to become king. And a man who waits that long does not tend to hand the prize back early. Sir Vernon Bogdanor, the King's College London scholar who has spent his career studying the crown, has put it plainly. He has said he is certain Charles will follow his mother's example and never step down, because Charles understands that in Britain, being head of state is a commitment for life. And everything in the King's conduct since his accession in September 2022 points the same direction. So, the first honest answer to our question is this. For Charles to abdicate, he would have to break the single most powerful taboo his family carries, and defy the verdict of the scholar who understands the Constitution better than almost anyone alive. On paper, the case is closed. And yet, in the last few years, something has shifted, and the shift started far from London.
The Queen's very proud of William. It took her a long time to really get to know him because she didn't see that much of him. But she realizes that he has what it takes.
Before we get to that shift and to the legal earthquake, an abdication would actually trigger. Take 1 second and subscribe. This channel breaks down what is really happening inside the royal institution without the invented drama, and you do not want to miss what comes next. The legal machinery. Most people assume a king can simply resign, sign a letter, hand over the crown, done. In Britain, that is not even close to true. When Edward VIII abdicated, his signature alone changed nothing. Parliament had to pass a specific law, His Majesty's Declaration of Abdication Act, to actually remove him from the throne. The monarchy is woven into British law so tightly that only legislation can alter who wears the crown. And in 2026, it gets more complicated still. Charles is not only King of the United Kingdom, he is separately head of state of 14 other realms, including Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and Jamaica. Under the constitutional arrangements that trace back to the Statute of Westminster of 1931, Changes touching the succession conventionally require the agreement of those realms. Bogdanor has spelled out that machinery himself. An act of parliament in Britain and consent from every other realm, a process that in Canada could involve every province, Quebec included, and in Australia could even trigger a referendum. We saw a small preview in 2013 when simply allowing daughters equal rights in the line of succession required coordinated legal changes across the Commonwealth realms, a process that took years of quiet diplomacy. So, picture the reality. An abdication announcement from Buckingham Palace would not end the story. It would start a process involving parliaments and governments on multiple continents. Any gap, any disagreement, any realm that moves slowly could create the bizarre possibility of Charles remaining king of one country while William reigned in another. Then comes the moment of transfer itself. The instant an abdication took legal effect, William would be king. Not after a ceremony, not after a coronation. Immediately. The Accession Council would gather at St. James's Palace to proclaim him, just as it proclaimed Charles in September 2022. A coronation could follow months later, or, in theory, not at all. Edward VIII was never crowned, and he was still fully king. The crown moves at the speed of law, not pageantry, but the law is only half of it, because something happened in Europe that quietly rewrote what abdication could mean. The European wave. For most of modern history, Britain could tell itself that abdication was a scandal, full stop. Then Europe proved otherwise. In 2013, Queen Beatrix of the Netherlands stepped down for her son, Willem-Alexander, continuing a Dutch tradition where abdication is simply how the crown moves between generations.
But, you know, William's old enough and sensible enough to take care of himself on the road, and he doesn't take unnecessary risks.
The same year, King Albert II of Belgium handed his throne to his son Philippe. In 2014, King Juan Carlos of Spain abdicated in favor of Felipe VI. But the moment that truly landed in London came on New Year's Eve, 2023. Queen Margrethe II of Denmark, Europe's longest-serving monarch and a close historical parallel to Elizabeth, calmly announced in her annual address that she would step down after 52 years. 2 weeks later, she signed a declaration at a council meeting, and her son became King Frederick X. No crisis, no scandal. Danish crowds cheered in the streets of Copenhagen. Royal watchers immediately asked the obvious question: if Denmark's queen could do it with dignity, why not Britain's king? And that question gained a sharper edge in February 2024, when Buckingham Palace announced that Charles had been diagnosed with a form of cancer. He continued treatment while carrying out duties, and the palace has consistently projected confidence. But the announcement did something irreversible. It made the public think seriously for the first time in decades about the transition to William. To be clear, and this matters, there is no credible indication that Charles intends to abdicate. Every reliable report points the opposite way. But the Danish precedent means the idea is no longer unthinkable. It has moved from impossible to merely unlikely. And in royal terms, that is a seismic shift. And nowhere does that shift create more uncertainty than around one person the rulebook simply cannot account for. The Camilla question. Every scenario we have covered so far has a precedent somewhere. This one has none, and you should be suspicious of anyone who claims to know the answer. Camilla was crowned queen alongside Charles in May 2023, the final step in a rehabilitation that took a quarter of a century. But her status flows entirely from being the wife of the reigning king. So, what happens to the wife of a king who is no longer reigning? Britain has never once faced that situation. Edward VIII abdicated before marrying Wallis Simpson, so there has never been a living former queen consort standing beside a living former king. Experts can only reason from fragments. When Edward stepped down, his brother made him Duke of Windsor, a fresh title for a man who could no longer be called king. Something similar could, in theory, be crafted for a retired Charles and for Camilla. European examples offer another path. In Denmark, Margrethe kept the style of queen after stepping down, becoming a queen without a throne, while her son's wife Mary became the new queen. Britain could copy that model, meaning the country would briefly have two living queens, Camilla and Catherine. A protocol puzzle for the ages. Which path would Britain take? Here is the uncomfortable truth. Nobody outside the family could say, And anyone presenting invented palace conversations as fact is selling you fiction. What we genuinely know is that the relationship between William and Camilla has been described by royal biographers over the years as correct rather than warm, and that the final shape of her status would rest with the new king. The likeliest expert guess is a dignified arrangement negotiated quietly long before any announcement. But it would be a guess, so the question hangs there, unanswered and unanswerable. If the moment ever came, what would William actually decide? The William factor. Because an abdication is never only about the man leaving, it is about the man arriving early. William is in his mid-40s with 3 school-aged children and a wife who faced her own cancer diagnosis and recovery in 2024. Everything the Wales family has communicated in recent years points to a fierce protection of their children's ordinary routines.
William likes to ride his motorbike because when he's got his helmet on, he's totally anonymous and people, don't notice him on the road.
School runs, weekends in Norfolk, a childhood as close to normal as royal life allows. The moment William becomes king, that careful structure comes under enormous new pressure, and one detail should stop you cold. George is 12, and his grandfather Charles was 12 when the weight of destiny began visibly shaping his life. There is also a constitutional wrinkle that few people mention. A living former king is a new kind of problem. Would Charles attend state occasions? Would foreign governments seek his views? Every word from a retired monarch risks being read as commentary on the current one. Spain lived through a painful version of this when Juan Carlos, years after abdicating, left the country amid financial controversy, an outcome that haunted the Spanish crown. The British system has no protocol whatsoever for a retired sovereign because it has never needed one. Charles would be inventing the role in real time, in front of the world. And this, quietly, may be one of the strongest arguments Charles himself would weigh against abdication. His mother's model kept the monarchy simple. One sovereign, one voice, no shadows. Break that, and you create 2 courts, 2 households, and endless invitations for comparison. Which brings us to what the palace appears to be doing instead. And it is hiding in plain sight. The quiet alternative. So, where does the evidence actually land? The realistic future is more interesting than the fantasy. British constitutional law already contains a softer tool, and Charles has used pieces of it. The Regency Acts allow councillors of state, senior royals, including William, to carry out the sovereign's duties when the monarch is unwell or abroad. During his cancer treatment, the practical weight of the monarchy visibly tilted toward William and Camilla without a single legal change to the crown itself. Royal commentators widely expect this to be the actual pattern of the coming years. Not abdication, but a gradual transfer of visibility, workload, and public focus, with Charles remaining king-in-law until the end, exactly as his mother did. Think of it as abdication in function, but never in name. The taboo stays intact. The realms face no legal scramble. Camilla's status never has to be renegotiated, and William steps into the role by degrees, protected from the shock his great-great-uncle inflicted on the family in 1936. Could that calculation change? Honestly, yes. Health can change it. The Danish example proved a beloved monarch can leave gracefully. If Charles ever reached the point where he could not perform his duties at all, historians note the family would face a choice between a formal regency and the once-forbidden alternative. But as things stand today, every serious signal says the same thing. Charles intends to die a king, and William is being prepared, patiently and deliberately, for a moment neither of them will schedule. The real royal story is not a shouting match behind palace doors. It is a slow, careful handover happening in plain sight, hidden only by the fact that nobody announces it. So here's the question for you. If the decision were yours, should Charles follow Denmark's example and hand William the crown while he can still guide him, or hold the throne for life the way his mother did? Drop your answer in the comments because this debate is only getting louder. And if you want the real story behind the headlines, subscribe and turn on notifications because the next chapter of this monarchy is already being written. Thanks for watching, and we will see you in the next one.